Okay, for this activity, we are going to look into creating this console. And the idea is that when we create this console, we are going to place it into this section here in the living room. And we'll be able to place a television on top of it. Now, the main purpose of doing this is sometimes when creating a BIM model, you may find that locating certain furniture, so for example, these typical chairs, you can easily find in the library that comes with Revit. However, certain custom furniture, for example, this console here, you will notice that it's a little bit more tricky to find these elements. So what we're going to do is create a BIM model of this console, and this will allow us to be able to modify the height and the width so that it can fit other areas of the BIM model. Now, in a nutshell, Revit really has two modeling modes. There is the project environment, which is what we are accustomed to, and then there is the family modeling environment, and this environment is specifically created for modeling or creating families that you then insert into your BIM model. Now, the family modeling environment is divided into three categories. You have a user interface just for the family modeling. Then there is the conceptual mass editing. And then there is the model in place. Now, these three methods of creating families are also embedded in Revit. And usually whenever you start a new Revit project, you choose between going into the project modeling environment, which is to create your building, or go into the family modeling environment, which is to create assets to go into your building. Now, by default, Revit does have some pre-made assets, but in this case, we are going to use the family modeling environment to create our own assets for this project. Now, when you open Revit, usually we go straight to create a new project, which is under the models section. This time around, we are going to go to create a new family. So we're going to click new, and when you open that, you will notice that you get a list of categories. In my case, I have all of these categories for Revit families here. Now, what these are templates for you to use to create your family. So remember, Revit families can really be anything. They can be 3D objects, they can be 2D objects, they can be electrical components, they can even be structural components. Families can really be anything that you insert into your project. Now, this is why there are pre-made templates that are made. So for example, in this case, we are going to choose the English. Notice that there's English and English Imperial. English, this means that it's metric, and we're going to be creating a metric model. So I'm going to go here, and then you're going to notice a list of all the family templates. Now basically, if you were creating a baluster, then you would use the baluster category. If you were creating a column, then you'd use the column template, and so forth and so forth. A door, then you would use the door template. All of these templates are set up based on what you are creating, and if you have no idea what you are creating, there is also a general template here, which is not necessarily recommended because usually you can find the category that you are creating. Now in our case, we're going to be creating the metric furniture, and we're going to be using the metric furniture template, so we're going to open that up. Now once that is open, you will notice that your family environment is a little different. It looks very similar to the project environment. So for example, you can navigate your project here, and you still have your properties that are also here. Now at the top you still have all your ribbons, but they are a little different, and as a matter of fact, it's a stripped down version of the project environment. Now when you're in this particular family environment, you notice that you get the create tool, where you can now create any 3D object using these methods, and these methods we would have been familiar with throughout Revit usage. Now for the most part, we are going to be using the extrude tool a lot, and we are going to be also using the reference plane as well, along with our work planes. So these are going to be some of the more popular tools that we will use. Now when we are using Revit in the family environment, we are going to make a lot of use of the reference planes. And the reference plane and reference lines, think of them as construction lines, right? If you were creating a sketch, you may put down construction lines to help guide you in the placement of your actual lines, right? So this is what the reference planes are primarily used for, and then they're going to help us to get some functionality, some parameters to our objects. So for example, we can adjust the height and the width of objects using the reference planes. So with that said, let's take a look on our model. Now the first thing we're going to do is use our reference plane to lay out the extents, the main boundaries of our model, right? So right away we can see that the width of our model is 53 centimeters. So we're going to go to create, and we are going to use our reference plane, and we're going to draw an arbitrary line this way and draw an arbitrary line that way. Then after we draw it, we're going to revise it to represent what we have here. So currently we want this width here to be equal to that dimension there. So we are going to choose the dimension here, and we're going to say 53 centimeters. And if we look here, we can see that this dimension here should be equal to that dimension there, which is 150 centimeters. So 180 centimeters rather, and there we go. So right away we have now created the boundaries for our model. Now that we have the boundaries, we can perhaps start to work on the outer parts of the model here. Now this is going to be really simple because we can just draw the base of our model and then extrude it upwards. So to do that, we are going to go to create, and we're going to create an extrusion, and we are going to use the rectangle tool for our sketch tool, and we are going to draw this part of our model here, and we're just going to sketch that in. And this base here really represents this leg that we're going to use there, right? So the actual thickness of that would be 225 centimeters. So we're going to click this line here and then change that to 22.25, rather 2.25 centimeters. There we go. And that's about it. So we just choose OK. And if we look at that in 3D, so we're going to choose our 3D tool, which is located up there. And we are going to dock, we are going to detach our 3D view here, and we are going to dock it to the right hand side, like that, so we can get an idea of what is happening. So based on what we have now, this wall here is really the edge of the cabinet there. So we now need to make it the actual height, and we can see that that height is 28.5 centimeters. So we're going to click here, and this is going to be 28.5 centimeters. Right. Actually, what we're going to do is we need to make this height here equal to that height there, which is really 53 centimeters. So we're going to do that now. So we are going to do 53 centimeters. All right, there we go. Now what we have here is, notice that it says our reference view, and that is what it says here, and this is essentially our plan view. In this case it's a plan because we're looking downwards on the top, and we are seeing this view here from a plan view like that. Now the next thing that we need to do is to copy this side here over to form that side, and we can do that with our plan view. If we look here, we can just make a copy. So we're going to go to copy, and we're going to grab this right here and make a duplicate of that right there. So now we currently have these two edges here, which this edge represents that edge and this edge represents that edge. Okay, so now that we have those views, we are going to now draw the top part of this model. Right now, in order to draw the top of this model, we would need to basically construct a sketch like that and then extrude it upwards. The trick with this is that we need to let our work plane now be the surface on top of these walls, because our work plane is currently down below, because we used our work planes to create the base of these objects and then extrude them up, and we created the base of this object here and then extruded up. That means our work plane is basically operating like there. So we need to change that work plane now and place that work plane on the top here so we can create the surface right there. So to do that, we are going to create a reference plane, and this time we're going to look at the front. So we are going to go to the front view, and we are going to do that by using our view section right here. Now when I go to front view, I am able to now create a reference plane. Now, interesting note, if I go to the front view here in my 3D view, notice that I cannot create a reference plane because this is a 3D view, and reference plane only works with the elevation views. Your reference line, however, will work anywhere, because your reference line is basically just a line that can appear in any view. However, in order for us to apply some functionality to our model, to be able to change the height and the width and all that stuff, we would need to use the reference planes. So because of that, we are going to keep this in 3D view here, and we are going to be using our elevation views. Now, it's also a good idea to name your reference plane. So in this case, when I create this plane here, I'm going to say, make sure that I'm in the front view, I'm going to say reference plane, and I'm going to start here and just draw an arbitrary line like that. I can always edit it afterwards. Let's extend it down, and I'm going to call this top of console. Now, it doesn't matter how far you extend the edges of the reference plane, doesn't really matter, because the reference plane is basically a reference line that helps you with creating your model. So now that this is created, what I'm realizing here is that the top of our desk is going to should fall within this distance, like about that, which means that we are going to have to push the top of this down a little bit in the future. Okay, so in order to make the work plane at the top now, so we've created this we've created this reference plane, and we've called it top of console. Now if we go over to create and we start to now play with our work plane, and we click show work plane, we can see this is just asking me to save. So it's a good idea that we save at this point. So I'm going to save this project, and what we will see is, if I'm going to enable it in my 3D view, you will see that the work plane is here. Now if we take a look over here, when we let's select the work plane first. So with the work plane selected, we also see we have a work plane grid space. So for example, if I change this to a shorter grid space like 500, then notice that the grid spacing gets smaller. Now this is really just for reference purposes. It doesn't really affect you when you are modeling, but it just helps you to get an estimation of sizes with the grid space. Alright, so now what we want to do is we want to have this work plane to be at the top for when we create the model at the top. So then what we want to do is we need to go to set in order to change this work plane, and we're going to change this work plane to the top of console because we created a reference plane there, and choose OK. Now once we do that, notice that the work plane jumps to the top of the console. So if I kind of rotate this and take a look here, you can see that it's now at the top of the console. Now I can extend this down. It doesn't matter how big this is. Work planes are pretty much infinite. But what this means now is anything I draw will now be on top of this work plane, and then I can extrude upwards. Alright, so with that done, I am now going to, let's do this in the plan view. So I'm going to go back to my reference level, and with this reference level I am going to create a, well, let's turn off the work plane here so we don't get confused. So this is the top, and I'm going to create another extrusion using the rectangle tool, and I need to create this tool like that, and the height of this should be the same. If I look at it here, you can see that it is 2.25 centimeters, and I'm gonna choose OK. Now notice when I created this, it created down here, and the reason for that is if I click on this object here, you will see that I need to edit this work plane. So I'm going to go to edit work plane, and I'm going to say, hey, this work plane should be here, top of console, and I'm going to choose OK, and it should just pop up there like that. Now we do have to make some edits because this is actually a little taller. So if I go to my front view here, you will see that this work plane is indeed on top. So we need to carry this down a bit lower. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust this height here. Now I'm also going to turn off this work plane. Now notice what happens when I adjust this reference plane height. Now as you can see, as I adjust this reference plane, notice that the surface travels with it. Now the reason it does this is because while creating this work plane, this object was actually constrained to this work plane by default. Now notice that these elements here are not moving with it, only this element. And let's make one edit here. Notice that if I click this and I extend this up, and I'm gonna hover so that it snaps on this work plane, and I release, notice I get a little lock here, and this part here is important because once I lock this is telling me that, hey, this surface is going to be locked to this work plane. So let's try that out. Let's lock this. So we're going to just click on that. So that is locked, and then we are going to do the other side, and then we are going to lock that. Let's adjust this work plane now, and notice that when I adjust this work plane, everything adjusts with it, which is good because when we now want to change the height of our table, we just need to adjust the height of this work plane. Now we also notice that Ideally, this work plane is really set to the top of the console, and this isn't really the top, this is kind of underneath the top of the console. However, the top and these walls has already been locked to this work plane. Now we can just as easily unlock it, because if I click on this solid here now, notice this icon here, and this icon is telling us that, hey, this object is locked to this work plane. So what we're going to do is we are going to click this icon here. So I'm going to click this, I'm going to click this icon here once, and now notice what happens when I move this. It's no longer attached. So this work plane is free, and it's this surface is no longer constrained. Now, if ideally what I would want to do is to constrain the top of this to this work plane. And how you do that? Well, if I try to move the work plane to the top here, you know, it's not going to automatically attach there, so that's not going to work. Instead, what I have to do is I need to consider my best options here. So what I would do in this case is, let's reattach this to this work plane. Now, in order to reattach this to this work plane, I would need to click on the object here, and when the object is selected, I go to edit work plane, and then I'm going to select top of console and choose OK. Now once that is done, what I can do now is I can do a negative 22.5 millimeters, and now this would allow it to go underneath. Now notice I still have these still intersecting here, because if I move this top here, then everything will move just fine. However, I don't want this to be intersecting here, so I'm going to well, it is attached now, so if I try to move it, everything is going to move. So what I need to do is, when I select this, I need to unlock that, and then when it is unlocked, then I can move it. So now this is detached. But then what I'm going to do is attach it to the base of this, and then I'm going to lock that. Now I'm also going to do the same thing to the opposite end here. I'm going to click that, and just like before, I'm going to have to, when I select this here, if I move this like that, it's not attached, but then I want to attach it to here, and then I'm going to say lock. Now when I move this, everything moves because the top of this is attached to the bottom of that. Then also the edge here, this object here, is attached to this reference plane. So this is the real difference when modeling in a family editor. You now have to consider what is attached to what, because that is essentially the advantage of the family editor. Because when we go in to change these objects, to change the height of this table, then it will change according to what we have attached here. So we're going to set back this height, and currently we have this height at 53 centimeters. So we're going to say 53 centimeters. There we go. And all of that is attached there now. Now we do have to put in the base here. So let's take a look at this table in 3D. And we're going to turn off our work plane just to get a better view. Alright, great. So now what we need to add is a member here, like that. and another one below like that. So these members here would represent here and underneath here. Okay, so to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to just move our work plane. So we're going to move the our work plane, which is currently here. As a matter of fact, let's take a look on that. So we can go to show work plane, and this work plane is now on the surface, so we need to move it. We need to move this work plane down to that level here. So to do that, we're going to go from our front view again, and then we are also going to make another reference level. So we're going to create a reference plane. So as usual, we are going to draw this reference plane, and to get some better real estate here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dock this below, since it's more of a horizontal model. It will work a little better with our view. Alright, so we're going to go to create, and we're going to create another reference plane, and I'm just going to add it in, and I'm going to add in another reference plane here. So these two reference plane now represents that height, and this bottom one here represents that height. So notice that before we go modeling, we put in these reference planes first, and from the demonstration earlier, we realized that reference planes really gives us the functionality so that when we move, our model can expand or contract or be edited. All right, good. So let's look at the height of this now. So we have this reference plane should be 16.5 from difference from underneath this plane here. So it would be a good idea to add another reference plane that is underneath here. There we go. And let's make it a little longer. Remember, the length of the reference planes does not matter. By the way, if the scale of your dimensions and text is too big, we can actually just edit this scale here. So we could go to a maybe that's too small. Let's go like that, just to get that out of the way. And just to be neat, we could line these up. So there we go. There we go. So that things are a bit neat there. All right, great. Okay, so we have these reference planes. Now notice this one here, I didn't exactly put a name just yet, so I may add that in a little later. But for now, we want the distance between these two reference planes to be 16.5 centimeters. And we want the height difference between these two here to be 28.5 centimeters. So I'm going to click on this one and then make that 28.5 centimeters. Alright, so we basically have all our heights for the different levels here. So in 3D view, what we need to do is move our work plane down to this plane here so we can create this horizontal member that would reside right here. All right, so we're going to do that. So we are going to click this reference. Well, we can actually go to extrude. And before we actually start to extrude, we can go to set, and we will set our reference plane. Now notice when I click here, the names of the reference plane doesn't come up. The only thing I see here is top of console. And the reason for that is we did not name, so I'm going to cancel this now because we did not name this reference plane. So you realize that when you don't name your reference plane, they don't come up for you to select. All right, so we're going to call this inside shelf top, and we're going to call this base bottom. All right, great. So now when we go to extrude and we say, hey, before we start to sketch out what we want to extrude, let us set our work plane. So we go to work plane here, and notice we see now inside shelf top. So we choose that, and we can well, we need to take a view that will show that. So we are going to use our 3D view, which is already open here, right? And then we're going to go to show. So notice that our work plane is now at this level, right? So that means anything we draw will be at that level. Now we're gonna choose this here, and I'm gonna just orbit this in a way that I can see it. So maybe like that. And well, let's use the revise it method. So we're gonna draw it, and then we are going to revise it. So I'm going to use the align tool here. And I'm going to choose this edge here and align that to that. I'm going to choose this surface, align that, and let's go here. Let's choose this edge, and let's that one is already aligned. Now I'm going to go negative 22.5 again, because I am going downwards like that, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm actually going to go to file and go to extrude, go to create, and then go to extrude, and then I'm going to go to set work plane, and this time I'm going to set it to base bottom. There we go. So notice that it jumps down there now, and then I'm going to use the rectangle tool again, and I'm going to go from, oh, these grids actually give me an intersection point, so that's great. I'm going to just sketch it in first, and then I'm going to use my align tool, which shortcut is AL, to align that, and I'm going to align that. I'm using the tab key to grab the back of that. I'm going to use a tab key to grab the front of that, and align that to there. Oh, that one is already aligned, and align that to align that to there. All right, there we go. Now this time we're going to go positive 22.5, and we're going to choose OK. All right, so now we have the top of our base here, and what that leaves us with are these divisions that we have here, these two divisions there. So we're going to insert that now, and they are basically extrusions just like before. So what we're going to do is now what we're going to do is we're going to put in some more reference lines here, so reference planes rather. So make sure that we are on the front view. Remember, reference planes can only be put in on elevation views. So we're going to go to reference plane, and I'm just going to drop a reference plane like that, and drop another reference plane like that. Now these are not equal, I've just estimated them. Now we can see here that these three areas here are equal. So 57, 57, 57. And Revit has a feature where we can easily make these spaces here equal by using our dimension tool. So we're going to go to create and or rather annotate, and we're going to grab our dimension tool, and we're going to just click here, click the second one, click the third one, and click the last one like that. And then what we're going to do is we need to click this EQ button here, and once we click that, Revit will automatically divide these lines equally. Now notice when it divides it equally, it does not put a dimension here, and the reason for that is if I should grab this line here and then I try to move it, notice what happens. Revit will always keep these lines equal. So right away you can see how your model is changing in width or height, depending on what objects are attached to that. There we go. So right, so the top of console is attached to this object here, and this is why when we move it, notice that the top increases. This one here is not attached to anything, so this is why it does not move. However, this line here is attached to this edge and this line to that edge, so that's why when I move this, everything will move, but at the same time it will keep these areas equal. So you can start to see the way these reference planes start to act on this model. All right, so once that is done, now we need to create the central pieces here. And to do this, what we're actually going to do is we're going to click this reference plane here, and we could call this center 1, and we could call this center 2. And now we go to extrude, and we're going to choose our reference plane again, and this time we're going to choose center 1 that we just created here. Let's show it. We need to show this in the 3D view. The reason this dialog box comes up is because Revit is saying, hey, if you create a reference work plane here, you're not going to be able to see from a front view, so you need to select a view that you can actually see the work plane at. So I'm going to choose the 3D view here, and then I'm going to show it in 3D, and notice you can see that the reference plane is now attached here to that line there. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to draw a we're just going to sketch it in, and then we revise it. So once it's there, we're going to use the align tool, and we're going to align the bottom and the front and the surface here, and I'm using tab to go to the back there. All right, great. And then we're going to choose OK. Now notice what happens here, and I'm going to show you. Let me show you with the work plane. Let's click this object here. There we go. let's show this. Okay, now notice if you look at this work plane here, you can see that let's look at it better from the top view. Now our work plane that we're seeing here, let's go to create and let's look at set. This work plane is showing the top of the console here. Let's see what it looks like from center one. So that is what that work plane looks like, which makes sense. So we made it here. But if you look at the front view, notice that ideally, this is going to one side. Ideally, we would want half to be on that side and half on this side. So this is where our extrude options comes in. And notice we have 225 here. Now, ideally, we would want to have it to be half of 225. And one of the awesome features of Revit is that you can insert a formula directly here. So for example, I could bring up my my calculator here and say, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I would need to plug in 22.5 and divide that by 2, and then I say, oh, okay, so each of these need to be 11.25 millimeters. But instead of using the calculator, what we can do in Revit is say, okay, equal 22.5 divided by 2, and I can press enter, and voila, it already did that for me within here. So I can now just put minus 11.3 here, and there we go. So now this is half and half, and at the same time it still maintains a link to this reference line here. So notice if I move it, everything moves because it's all constrained. All right, this is great. Okay, so now I just need to copy this to the other end, and to do that, well, I would need to move my work plane. So I'm going to go to set, and I'm going to set my work plane to center 2. So now my work plane is there, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to create, and I'm going to create a extrusion. Now this time I'm going to just grab here, and I'll just put it there. Now we aren't able to exactly copy this here, and one of the reasons for that is when we are modeling here, we have to be very mindful of the work planes that we attach our models to. So I'm going to do the same thing again, 11.3, and then this is going to be negative 11.3, and I'm going to choose OK, right? So now we have where this object here is connected to this plane here. So when I move this, so you can actually test this, like this is how your model is going to edit when you change the size. And this is one of the major advantages now that we have our actual elements attached to these reference planes. Now the last thing for us to do is to put in the surfaces. So on the back, it's just going to be one large surface, and we can know the front different from the back. If we look at our view cube here, we can see that this is the front, and so we can spin it around, and then we can see that this is the back. Now in this case, we would go to a top view here, and let's see here now. So this would be the front and this would be the back. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to set our work plane, and we're going to set our work plane to we need to actually name this, so we're going to call this back. So now when we go to set our work plane, we are going to set it to the back here and choose OK. And let's look at that in the 3D view. So this is the back of our model and this is the front. So now that the work plane is on the back, we can just do a nice big extrusion to cover all of the back of this model. So we'll just grab it here and go all the way here, and we're just going to estimate it first, and then we're going to use the align tool and align that, and it's going to be the same 22.5, and we're going to say yes. And oh, we need to be all right, that is it. Oh, actually it's carrying our last measurement, so we need that to be 0, right, so that it's doing that. Okay, great. So there we have it. Now we have the back, and then we want to do the front. Now actually we want to have this going the other way, so we are going to do negative 22.5 so that it's going inside, and then we're going to edit these extrusions so the extrusions are landing on the inside. So we're going to align these to the inside. There we go. All right, that is much nicer. And then we are going to align these as well now. So let's do this one first. So we're going to go to edit extrusion, and we're going to edit these lines here. Let me use the align tool so that we want to align it to the back, so we need to get a view of it. So there we go. So we align that like that, and let's align these two elements here. So we can actually just drag this, and let's see if we can just drag it. There we go. And we'll do the same for this. We'll just drag it back and drag it forward till it snaps right there. All right. Okay, so that is much neater. Now what we need to do is to do the cabinet covers here, and this is fairly simple because we have these dimensions already, so we can actually do this from the front view. And in this front view, all we need to do is to set the sizes of these cabinets. So we just need to create another reference plane that's going to be about there. Oh, actually no, we don't need a reference plane here. We already have all the planes that we need, so we need to move our work plane to the front. So we're going to go to set work plane to the front. Will it go to the front? And when we set it to the front, so we can now see that the work plane is now at the front. So if we look at this model, we can see that this is now at the front. And with that work plane now at the front, now we can go ahead and do an extrude. And let's show the work plane. So yep, the work plane is at the front. So we're going to use the rectangle and we're going to draw this, oops, to this one here. And then we are going to now draw the inside. Which we're going to do an offset, and that offset would be 6.75. So we're going to set that to 6.75 and do an offset here, and we're going to trim those up. Oh, it did make a little error here. This actually goes to here, and then we are going to offset this like that. So we're going to trim this up. And we're going to choose OK. We also need to set the thickness of this, so it's going to be 22.5. And there we have it down here. Alright, so now we have this all done up, and we do also need to insert the glass, so we're just going to do another extrude. Do it from the front view. And we're going to let that thickness be 10 millimeters. There we go. So that takes care of the glass. And the last little part now will be this handle that we see here. And this handle is pretty basic. We're going to use a sweep tool to actually get this done. So to do that, we're just going to turn this to this side view. Right, and we can see this. This is the left view. And if we ever get confused of which view is where, you can just watch your view cube here. So you can see that this says right view, and if we spin it around, it says left view. So we can know that, oh, we're actually on this side here. right? So that is what is being done there. All right, so to get this part done, well, first let's locate the center of this here. So this time around we can use a reference line, and the reference line will just help us to just get our center points down. So for example, you know, so that's the center point there, and that's all the reference point is useful for, because these aren't actually modeled objects. These are just assisting us to find the center point. I'm gonna make this a little shorter. Right, and all we have to do now is we're gonna choose a sweep to get this done. And first we're going to do the sketch, and to do the sketch we're going to start from here, and this length should be 1, or we could make it 10 centimeters, 10 millimeters, and then we're going to angle down about 40 degrees, and we're going to make that 20 millimeters like that. So that takes care of the sweep path, and now we need to do the profile of what we are going to sweep. So we're going to go to edit profile, but we're going to go into a 3D view to do this part, because we want to be able to see the actual profile. So we're going to go to edit profile, and to do this, well, it might be easier for us to literally just draw this out. So I know the width, so the width is 12, and I also know the thickness of this, which is 1 millimeter. So I could draw 6. There we go. 6 millimeters. 6 centimeters that way. Then 0.5. Let's do that again. So that is 6 centimeters. All right. Yes, and then we're going to go up 0.5 centimeters, and we're going to go across 12 centimeters, and then we're going to go down 1 centimeter, come back across here, and we can just delete this first line here, because we'll just kind of use that to help us draw this real quick, and we'll just join this up here, and that gives us our shape, and we choose OK and OK again, and then we will get our sweep just fine. Alright, so we're going to save this again. There we go, and let's take a quick look back on this sweep here. So let's go to edit sweep. We do want we're going to edit our sketch path here, and we're going to just move this, because we want this to start there. Let's choose OK and OK again. Alright, there we go. And now we're going to switch to a front view. And from this front view, we can move this. We can just, let's see. We can just grab it there in the center. And if I hold shift, it will lock it in this axis. And it will just snap to the center there while I hold shift. All right, now we only need to build one of this, and then what we're going to do is actually well, we can delete these reference lines that we used to help get the center point, because we no longer need them, so we're going to delete them. And what we're going to do is select this face here, and we're going to turn it into a group. I'm going to make that, let's call this door. And we're just going to copy. And we are going to copy again. There we go. All right. And that pretty much does it for our model. Let's turn off the view there. And there we have it. Okay, so now that we have the furniture all done, so all we have to do now is save our file and insert it into our plan. So I'm going to go to save as, and we're going to save it as a family. And for this purpose, I'm going to call this console complete. Now once it is saved, now I'm going to open my floor plan. And now that I have opened my floor plan, and let's say that I want to put that console right here. Now I would go the regular route, where I would go to architecture and I would go component, and I will go to place, and then I'll go to load family. And then I would browse to the location that I have my object saved. So in this case, and here it is, console creation complete. And I'm going to load this family. And now I'm able to insert it as my own piece of furniture. All right. Now that this is there, I am and now I have, if I cut a section or interior elevation, I will be able to see my model just fine. Now I do have one last thing to accomplish here with this model. One of the advantages of creating your model in the family editor is that I can now go in and change properties of this model. So for example, if I go to edit type, well, I'm not seeing any properties here, but it would be great if I had a property called height, and I was able to edit that height, and I could insert my height here, and it would change the height of, well, at least the top part of this console. So we're gonna test that out, because as this is, it's really just a static model, and we could have just built a static model in, let's say, SketchUp and imported it. Maybe it wouldn't look so neat, but it would still be a static model. However, the fact that we're using the family editor, we have additional options at our fingertips that allows us to make this object a parametric object. So we can attach our own parameters. So for example, if we wanted to make this part of the cupboard higher, we could just go into our parameters and edit it rather than having to edit the entire model. So let us test that out now. Now we already inserted the family, so what we're going to do is we're going to click on it and we are going to go to edit family. Now when we go to edit family, notice it's going to open back into the family editing environment where we have this 3D object here that we just created. Now I'm going to go to a front view and we can see where we had started to put in these reference planes. So for example, notice if I try to move this reference plane, it keeps everything equal. It does kind of mess up the cabinets here, but we're not concerned about that. What we want to edit is this space here, and we want to create a parameter. So when we edit this parameter in our project, this height will automatically change without us having to come in and edit the model. Now you can kind of get the idea of what will happen, because if I click this line here and I drag it up, well, what is happening here is, and let's do that in a 3D view because it can look a little bit deceiving. So we're going to go to a 3D view and we're going to dock that 3D view again down here. So as you can see, what happened here is if I grab this reference plane and move it, it does carry this with it, but it only carries the height. So well, I'm looking at a wireframe view, so let's look at a hidden line view to get a better view here. So notice what's happening. It's only attaches the height of this box here to this reference plane. So the underneath here is not attached to this reference plane. So what we're going to do is we are going to utilize the dimension tools, and the dimension tools are really have a superpower when in the family editor. So for example, I can use the dimension tool here and say, okay, between here and here it's 23. It actually just rounded it up, but that's okay. Now the dimension tools here has a little lock icon. So for example, right now this is not locked, so when I move this reference plane, then it will just, it is attached to the top here, but then all it does is extend this here. Let's put this in hidden view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this dimension like that, and what happens now is that when I move this, notice what happens. It keeps this 23 locked. So that means that this line will follow it all the time. Now notice that currently these two surfaces here are attached to this reference plane, but the underneath of here is not attached to anything, so it's just left there when it goes up. So ideally what we want to do is we want to attach the underneath here also to this reference plane. So let's undo that and see what that looks like. So if I undo that, now I'm gonna click this object here and I get this symbol. So this symbol tells me that, hey, this object is attached to a reference plane, which is the top one, but the top reference plane is only carrying the surface. we need to attach the bottom reference plane, the bottom surface to this reference plane, and then this reference plane is locked to that reference plane. So then the whole thing will move once I move this reference plane. So let's see that in action here. So what I'm going to do is go to I'm going to edit this extrusion, and I'm going to edit it in my 3D view. Okay, so that extrusion is fine. I don't need to trouble that. But this object here, I can extrude it down. But what I want to do is drag this extrusion to this reference plane here. And if you notice, that's right here. And I'm going to release. Now, when I do that, notice I get the lock icon here. So now I have the option to lock this surface to this reference plane here, this bottom reference plane. So I can lock this surface to this reference plane by enabling this lock here. So this is that added feature that you get when you use the family editor. So I'm going to lock that reference now, that surface to that reference plane. And now when I move this edge here, everything moves along with it, which is great because all those constraints are actually locked together. Now that this is working fine, because when I move this height here, everything moves, all I need to do is to create a parameter, right? And that parameter will be exposed in the project, and I just edit that parameter, and then the height will change without me having to come back into the family editor to now move this again. So to edit that parameter, I'm going to go for my dimension tool again, and I'm going to draw a dimension line from here to here. Now it does tell me the dimension there, and of course I'm not going to lock it because this dimension that I have here, I want it to be a parameter where when I edit this value here, it will push this line up, and this reference line will in turn grab this reference line, and this reference line will in turn grab this surface here. So you can see how all of these are linked together. So to turn this into a parameter, what I need to do is to click this dimension line, and I'm going to click this icon there, and when I click this, it says, hey, I want to turn this value into a parameter I can edit. What do I want to name the parameter? Well, let's call it shelf height, and I'm going to choose OK. And then notice what Revit does. It now says, hey, you can see that this is now shelf height. And to get an overview of all the parameters that is attached to this object here, I can click the categories button here, and you will see that this family, so far it has a parameter called shelf height, and this is the default. Now let's take a look back in our parameter here, and this is where we can actually test this parameter. So let's say that we change this height to 250. Let's see what happens and apply. And whoa, look what happened. What it actually did was it pushed this down. So what we have to keep in mind now, these are the thing about constraints. It's almost like Revit is saying, well, okay, rather than pushing this line up, it's much easier to push this line down, right? So but we don't want that, so we need to So we're going to cancel this out, and we're going to undo that. And what we need to do is we need to constrain this. So we need to put something here, and then we need to lock that and say, okay, this can't be changed. So Revit will have no choice but to push this measurement upward like that. So let's do that now. So we're going to create a dimension line, and we're going to dimension here to here, and we're going to lock that dimension. So now that this dimension is locked, let's go to our catalog here and let's test it again. So let's put this at 250. And there we go. So what's happened here is that Revit cannot move this measurement here because we have locked it. All right, well, that's supposed to be a lock. We have locked it, and because of that, the only thing Revit is left with is to push this measurement upward, and that is exactly what we want, because we don't want to change this measurement here. So this is just a small demonstration of how this could work, and we could even get more elaborate and put in parameters to change the width. But when we do that, we'd also have to deal with, you know, what about these distances? You know, what about the distances between the handles? We would have to put in constraints to lock these in, and that is essentially making the model now parametric, where we can just go in and change these options. So with that said, we're going to save this model. So we're going to do a save as, and we are actually going to save this as a file with parameter. So we're going to add that in there. Then we are going to open our model that we had originally placed the first console in, and we are going to go to component, and we're going to go to load family, and this time around we are going to load with parameter. And when we load that in, here it is. Now we're going to have these two models, and of course this was the one that we created, and then we now created this one that has the parameters to it, where we can actually change the height, right? So let us see if that works. So if we click on this object here and go to edit type, we see the shelf height, and right now it's about a little bit more than 7 inches. So let's put it to 10 inches and say okay, and look at that. So now we can like have this in different locations. So for example, I could make a copy of this like that, and then what I'd have to do is I would need to duplicate it. So I will create a new one, and let's call that parameter 2. And let's say for this one, when I go to edit type, I want this to be 1.5 feet. And there we go. So I have both of these objects, and they're really made from the same family, but because I've added a parameter, I can now go in and edit these rather than having to edit the family each time. and this is one of the major advantages with families. And you can have a simple thing, for example, like a shelf height, or you can get really elaborate with like height of the handle and height of the glass, and it can really get as elaborate as you want. But with this option, we can make this as efficient as possible. So that's our exercise. So I'm going to delete this one here, and this is the one I will use for my model, for my TV stand there. And now if I want to place a TV on top, well, then I will go to component, and I will load a family for that as well. So I'll go to my metric. Actually, this plan here is an imperial, so I'll go to my US imperial, and I will go to furniture and TV flat, and I will load that family. And there it is. Alright, so I'm gonna place it, and well, let's place it here, and I'm going to, yeah, I think I copied it twice. There we go. And now that I have placed it there, I want to just change the height. So I'll change the offset and I will just edit that offset here. I'll just maybe try and eyeball it a little bit. So let's try 3 feet here. Okay, that's a little tall. So let me put it at 2 feet there. And there we have it. We have a custom furniture that is also parametric.